Hi, this is Kelohi doing her common task for Edu 650. So the context is we're gonna talk about my story before I go through every single step that happened that led up to it. More like the summary of it, and then it'll just tie into everything I'm saying throughout the presentation. Definitely, this quote has been somehow my favorite quote at this moment. By Katherine Johnson, who is an African American mathematician. We will always have STEM with us. Some things will drop out of the public eye and go away, but there will always be science, engineering, and technology. And there will always be mathematics. And I kind of took this to heart because being a math teacher has definitely taught me that math is everywhere. And I knew that as a student. I knew that as a individual, but I just never knew how to translate it into my students. And that's what I'm learning. And that's actually what this company has really taught me how to do and how to continue doing and how to grow from that. And so we're going to start with my story throughout this time on the summary of it. So as an educator, I started off kicking this year off with more of a repeating cycle of notes, work, exit ticket, work, notes, exit ticket, opening. It was just like this repeating boring cycle. There are times where we had a breakthrough of more collaborations and engagement and all those things, but it wasn't consistent enough. Um, I was just more trying to survive each week, trying to make sure that I taught the unit, which hopefully my students catch on. Kind of like this tumbling down slippery slope that just went down faster and faster as we go on down the hill. And just never seemed to catch myself. I was definitely more controlling in the way things needed to be taught or needs to be understood rather than having my students really explore how they can do things, how they can connect things, how to connect. And it's just being the way that to make sure that they understood the unit, but it was just more so do it my way. Like any teacher. But now, as a performance assessor, I actually became more intentional in what the way I'm teaching, the way I'm making sure that they're collaborating, they are coming up with the creativeness, they are the ones planning it out, and also just letting go of that repeating cycle. The things that definitely changed while I was doing this, I could tell I was being more intentional on how to connect real world to mathematics. Remove that weird daily cycle of just stuck in this run of do the work, individual work, and somewhat collab, but that's it. Okay, cool. Moving on. And seeing that the growth in my students is beyond the cycle or a math class, shall I say. The cycle is math class, where when you come to math class, you're just expected to do the work and exit. And that was the thing that I was trying to break. And that's what I saw when we were doing this assessment. What I'm continuing to do, and what I hope to continue to grow is being more intentional in how I'm teaching the units. And also eventually flipping the way the instructional cycle is. In other words, flipping the way that, yes, we're gonna do an opener, just kind of get our brains going. Yes, I'm gonna tell them what they're gonna do today and maybe how, but more so in a way that I let go about 75% of the reins. To now my students coming together, figuring it out, um, and possibly teaching the class to where I don't need to do that part. I will be more so the guide and the mentor rather than the full on lead, and rather than just more so the little voice behind them to be like, hey, go this way. So now I'm more like a conscious than the brain, to make it like that analogy. So yeah, it's just that little still voice that tells you to do what's right rather than be the one that comes up with everything. Um, I feel like the things I have yet to learn when I went through this process was that needed to make sure that things are culturally relevant. And when I say culturally relevant, I don't just mean based on ethnicity. I also mean my students' background, my students' behaviors, their interests, their hobbies, the things they do outside of class, the things that connects them outside of class, the things that makes them a human being. So really making it more holistic of an assessment rather than can you do this? Um, and just kind of making it where it's more personable and more reasonable for them without overwhelming anyone. And the best thing to do that is through pacing and building throughout the unit. So one thing that I did wrong, I feel, was that I taught them and then I just stopped instructions at one point to do this. And I felt that was the wrongest thing later on because there were just some things that I missed teaching them and I didn't full on taught them. Like I let them just do the work and realizing hindsightly that should have done it where I wrapped this assessment amongst within the unit where this could have been more like exit tickets, this could have been more like a supplemental um build up throughout the unit. That if once I was focusing on one thing in the unit, that whatever reflected on the assessment, just kind of have the curriculum and the assessment reflect each other in the most beautiful way. And that's something that I really didn't do, which made the pacing a lot weirder and a lot more like fast, but unfortunately not complete. More like 85% completion, not 100. That 15% was pretty critical and unfortunately was not able to do. But the students still did what they had to do, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. Matters. What continue will be matter is my students need to realize that they have more tools than they realize, that it's not just me. Like how I mentioned, I'm more like the Jiminy Cricket rather than the Pinocchio who got to make his own choices. So yeah, where they be more Pinocchio, they make the choices, they make the decisions, realizing there's a lot more inside them than what people are saying about them, and realizing that there's a lot more to math than it meets the eye. And also connection from school to real world, especially in math. So that's one thing that I hope to continue to matter and continue to show them and continue to just grow, including if it's not this class, it's my next school year's class. And I think if I was to do this again, these are the things I'll try to hit and make sure that it's a lot built a lot better. And so now the process of designing an assessment and how we started it and how we end. So when I was making this, as you can see, the goal at first was to create a party. Um, they had to do the different things, plan for at least 25 people, and to kind of like give them about the hint of well, that they're coming for their class and not the whole team, because that's a lot of students. The other main party planners for 8th grade and teachers, and they had to use function tables to calculate how many balloons, cupcakes, and pieces to buy, to make sure that it's like planning budget. So they were like this planning party planner. Um, it started off really good when I made this idea, and I would do it based on their calculations, creativity, functional party planning, and whether or not it met the standards. Um, that was how I started. So this product right here, the grasps, is how I started when I was doing this. So based on that, I asked these 3 people, actually 2 of them, were my own from my own department. The last person that I asked, just so happened to be in my debrief with my coach. And so when it came to my instruction coach, she was telling me it's a great start. She's like, this is a great start. I love the idea. This is amazing. She said it does line up with the standards. And I'll show you the standards a little bit later because I realized I did not connect the standards to this at the time. She said it does line up with the standards where they're using functions, they're doing the tables and possibly the graphs. Although she's like, do you think it take it? She's like, how are you gonna take that one more step further? She said, do you think you can take one more step further? Or if it's this, is this gonna really push them to the edge, really connect them? That's kind of like around the lines that she was going at. So I would take that in place when I was talking to her. Which also at the same time, um, the district improvement facilitator in the same meeting with my instructional coach, was like, how will you accommodate all students level? How would you make sure that they're all doing it? How would you make sure that they're understanding it all with instructional math? And also, where's collaboration and engagement going to be happening? She's like, also, she noticed that it was kind of like one level she felt so she was like, what are the levels of complexity within this unit? She's like, the level of complexity of like, yes, they're doing functions and graphs and tables, but she's like, where's the actual creativity, the part where students can really grow from there, like actually apply it if they want to make this real, like that kind of thing. And she's like, I want you to think on how you can ensure that students are making a greater connection to ensure they have a role within this assessment that is meaningful. And that was her most biggest thing that she really emphasized was she's like, make sure the role is really meaningful to all students, because she's like, think about it. Students, not all of them has a party. Not all of them knows what a party looks like. Not all of them knows that it's okay to spend money for birthdays, for admirations, for people. Um, and she's like, think about your audience, who you're really trying to get, and it was just your students, and think about, is your students the type to really be a party? Does all of them like pizza? And so she was thinking about trying to get more student choices out of me. And so that, and then so my colleague, which is on the same math department and grade, he was like, this is a great idea. And he said, how are students going to show that they truly understand it? And that was his main thing. Like, he was really thinking about, to be honest. And all of these kind of made me like, okay. Um, so when I got their feedback, I at first was just like, okay. So I really more focused on complexity of it and how are they going to show it. So then I didn't really change it at the time, um, due to just the way my brain worked and trying to remember what they said and trying to really incorporate. So I was like, okay, a little bit of complexity, and how are they going to show it? I was like, well, we can make it where you're gonna also be a TED talker style of how to plan a party. And they had to show their steps. They had to show how they did it, how they decided that their party's gonna be the best, and all those different things. And I knew where the facilitator was coming from about student choices, that not all of them knows what it's like to be a party. But then I just thought, well, this is gonna be a great time to have them learn from it, how to make a party, just in case they ever get to do that ever again. And I know, but then the level of complexity, I just figured, okay, we're just gonna complex it within how they present it. However, when I presented, it came to the validation protocol results with this lovely group, with Tammy, Carrie, and Ebony, I presented this to them. This is what they said. And also, this is when I showed them the standards, the competency and standards of it all. I wanted students to become a complex thinker, demonstrate and use of prior knowledge for developing skills. So they have to use like past units, analyze solving problems, show clear understanding of their learning goals and task requirements, demonstrate in-depth experience, knowledge, and skills necessary for producing quality products and performances. Remains on task and perseveres up to the completion of quality work, performance, or product. And these are the functions. Understand that a function is a rule assigned to each input exactly to one output. So when we're using an equation, construct a model to linear relationship between two quantities, and each represent compare properties of two functions. And so when during the protocol process, the feedback and ideas came along. This is just more so the summary of it all. that they like the ideas of students connecting to the real world. They like the idea that, oh, students are gonna make a party, because it's real world stuff, and as if we want to implement it, we could. They felt like it's a really good beginning level of the student standards and the unit. So when I explained to them that, like, going back what they had to do and how it's going to function, you know, assigns to each input and output, we go back to here, the prices, for 5 people, this is going to be the cost of pizza. For 25 people, this is the cost. For balloons, is going to be the cost. And so they were like, this is very good at first level 1, meeting the standards. Then they're wondering, where was the coherent contrasting functions? Like, how are they really going to do that if everybody's the same? Everybody's going to be like 25 people, and that's it. Like, they're like, are you going to increase it more, or that kind of thing? Or are you just comparing the prices between the pizzas and the balloons, and like seeing what's cheaper, the different balloons and nice. So that's when I was explaining, like, well, they can do like between Papa John's and Little Caesars, who's cheaper, and kind of thing. So they kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But to be honest, they still felt like it was just mediocre. um, that's the feedback I really enjoyed listening to. They're wondering if this task truly allows students to be complex thinkers, since they have to analyze a problem and all those different things. They're like, we like the idea. They're like, keep the concept, but change the direction or theme of the assessment. So what they were saying was that they like the idea that students are connecting to the real world on functions. They're like, but change what's gonna be assessed. Change the way they're gonna be assessed. And then they're like, is this individual or group? And I was like, oh, pairs. And they're like, groups. Make it to groups. Find a way to make it more creative, more to another level, more. And then they're like, are there more choices for students besides the type of balloons where they're getting a pizza and party? That was the number one question. And then the ideas and questions. So then once I was like asking them, like, okay, so I need help. They were like, oh, let's figure out more student choice opportunities. Then we're like, what solutions can the students solve in the community? Because since we live in a community that kind of has been like on the negative side a lot, so we're like figuring out like what solutions can we do. And we know that people make businesses, that kind of thing. And the number one question was, where in the world has allowed equations and creativity happen at the same time? Boom. Next, somehow when somebody asked that question, they're like, well, we know that like stores, they gotta use math. We're just trying to figure out where's math, that and creativity. And we're like, well, stores, and then we're like, wait a minute. We were trying to think, like, we're like, well, we can have a bunch of like adults listening to kids, and next we started like thinking about Shark Tank Junior, and we're like, businesses. And that's actually how this next one got born. Was we're like, cool, we're gonna do a business proposal style. And during that part, and it was like really good. And so that's kind of like the feedback they were giving. And I felt like we did follow all the norms. We collaborated, and also I was very transparent with them on how rushed I was doing this, how my thought process was at the time too. It was so easy to share my thoughts and hear their comments and like really hear their feedback. And this is what was the authentic feedback that I got in within the conversations, like the summary of it all. And honestly, it was very transparent. It was so helpful. And because we're all different places and modules, and again, like math class, timing and pacing was, I would say, the hardest part in our meeting and making sure that we get it through. And we did have some issues with like the Google form and the validation resource, how we found the way to use them and create authentic feedback to each other. And we learned the importance that feedback really helps. For me, honestly, for somebody who was kind of still in the beginning process, thinking that like, oh, this just should be good, and then me only taking one step, and then how after this validation protocol, honestly, when I got the feedback from them, whether it was hearing them and making sure that everything we do is exactly the way we need to do it, and hearing that it needed to be even higher level, like to the point where students are really modeling what I'm asking for them to do, including in those standards. And so then we got the final assessment idea. So when I was asking my coach, this like I went back to my coach after the protocol and I asked her if there was somebody who ever done this. And she did tell me exactly who, and that we had a resource for this. And so that's why I put influenced and created by another math teacher. So just so happens that when we were coming up with the idea, I found out that my department had a resource for it. It did come from Teachers Pay Teachers, the paper, but she said you can use it in a way that would be better for your students. And so that's what I did. So pretty much my students' role now became business owners, where they created business for them to start off following the outline. Proposal could be in form of poster, a report, digital presentation, or any format approved by the teacher. You can get creative, but be sure to include the items. Business name, business description, chosen building options, cost and rent per month, cost of paying employees each month, total operations, description and cost for like regular membership and like gold status. That's what the silver means. And then project how many silvers, and based on projects, create a table showing. And so like it was a whole lot of processing. So these were the instructions that my students were given. And from there, it kind of led to the rubric, which I decided to keep it simple for the purpose of more so my students. So I kept it like this, to where calculations on business startup worksheet. So like, do I see errors? No errors, completely incorrect, or like they made no attempt at all. Excellent, where calculations showed us what was asking for. All information shown on the business proposal, those kind of things, projections, tables, and graphs on business proposals, overall effort. And so like pretty much I kept it very simple to where my students only need to understand that I want them to be as creative as possible, but make sure your calculations are correct. Make sure that you have every single information on business proposal to an extent that you meet the standards. And the standards are also based on, did they really show complex thinking? Did they really show quality producer? And actually it was more heavy. I made it clear and heavy said that it was based on quality producer. And for them, it's like your effort needs to show that you are a quality producer, and your complex thinking was based on how creative were you being, um how did you use math within your business, and also to is like how can you connect this to your real world. And so that's what finally came to. Oh, and when it got to the feedback, my team didn't really give me much feedback on this. They're like, this is pretty good, pretty simple, um, and that kind of thing. They're just saying, just make sure that I do this, but make sure I list more so what I'm looking for with my students, and making sure that, yeah, you can show the scoring rubric, but make sure you're showing also the quality part of not only are you scoring them, but you're also grading them based on quality and all the different things. So they're like just more heavy the emphasis of just make sure that you create something where they can actually see what you're looking for. And so yeah, so that's what I did with my students. Later on, I was just more so telling them and making sure that really that they just follow these instructions. And I say, if you follow these instructions and follow what it's asking, exact steps, then you should be fine in your proposal. Just do it to a way that would you be so proud of it, and making sure that you are a quality producer. So calibration results. This is when I implemented it. And this is where the 85% did it, 15% we didn't get to. And so for group one, this is group one. They made it super far, where the instructions, as you can see, sorry, let me move this up. They have to meet the hours of businesses. They need to figure out the employee rate. They need to figure out the monthly cost of their utilities. They have to figure out what's going to take for them to not go bankrupt. And they had to figure out those problem solvings. And it took, as you can see, group one really made sure they were doing this is like kind of like one of their final drafts of them doing the math and figuring out what do we do, how do we do it. And this was also with me on the side, guiding them, making sure that they understood what we're talking about on all those things. And yeah, the question is, does the monthly cost bring your business down, or do you still have a profit? And they figured it out when they were doing the math. They're like, oh, we have a profit. We're not going to go down and everything like that. And this was actually a really creative group, actually. They thought of a kidland. And as you can see, literally right here, where they're like potty room, main office, puzzles and games, nap time, playhouse, and just a chill area. They were figuring out, they designed like if we had the space, what we do. And then they realized this was the biggest space. And they realized like we had more time, more room and everything. And so then they're like, that's where the rent and utilities came from. And they were just like, this is it. We're choosing this area. And figuring out that like, okay, 21,600 per month we have to pay for rent and 410 per month for utilities. And they're realizing, wow, man, this can be really expensive. And those kinds of different things was noticing when I was observing them was that they really were considering the cost, but also to making sure that they do everything in their power to make sure that people are comfortable, like would really people really want to come, would people really want to send their kids there. And they did really well on this project. And that's the unfortunate part, that unfortunately I didn't have enough time for them to actually build their presentation the way they wanted to. If I did, they would have killed it in their presentation, I believe, based on this. And yeah, they even got to the point where they were looking at their goal a month and how much people they needed throughout their month to make sure that for the year, this is how much people you need every single year, every single month and year, to make sure that like for month one, we need 10 people, month two, 20. By the time we get year, we should be at least up to 180 per year in the gold status. Or I'm sorry, 120 in the gold status and 180 in the silver per year. And this just gave, and so they were really, really set on making sure that they did this well. For this part, in comparison to another group did just as good, but I feel like the other group did this part a lot more stronger and a lot more organized. This group, they started out well. They hit out the park. They figured out like, okay, we need to do this. For them, you could tell the difference between the two businesses. This business, however, was only gonna be kind of like a Five Nights at Freddy's. This one they called it Five Nights at Hawaii. And it only happens during October 1 to 31st. And so this one, they had to get a little bit more creative on what they would do. As you can see, their thought process was all over the place compared to the other group. And they figured it out, their thought process. They chose this option to do their actual like haunted house style. So yeah, they're kind of like a haunted house or Five Nights at Freddy's style of the haunted house. Influenced by it actually. And so they were telling me that yeah, it's like a maze and everything like that. And then this is their thought process to figure out what options they wanted, but then they realized like, as you can see, like cost a lot, but not too much popularity. They're like, no, we don't need this much. We actually just like this will be perfect. Um, it's it's small enough, but also grill me enough to make sure we have everything we need. And so that was the kind of cool part of seeing their thought process. And for them, due to the pacing and also the different obstacles that they had to go through, like there was only like 3 people, but there's one partner only came so many times to school, so then only 2 people. And then sometimes one of them would be sick, or so one of them. So it was a lot of pacing issues with them and figuring out how they were going to complete this and everything. They were really close to of getting to that next process too. So, and also on my end too, I didn't really plan it out very well for them, but I was still impressed with how much they did. And so that's how I kind of based on grading them, was based on the sheet right here, and seeing how they planned it out in this sheet and everything. That was really the part that they got through it. So during the calibration my results, what were the major findings of the calibration session? So when talking to a colleague or two, they realized students' creativity was off the charts. Like students were, if I had to talk about all my students were coming up with hair salons. They were coming up with chill spaces for them. They were coming up with um places that they want to be proud of. They want to show people. They want to be a positive space for the community. And it was just places that would be some of them, and you came with sports places that were like off the chart, like where they're like making sure that like, NBA people, famous people are coming, so that it builds the community kids and that they can grow up and reach their dreams. It was just so amazing. Like even I have a theme park in a different class project that one came up with a theme park. It was just like, and I know for them it was well, because of the processing, unfortunately they only got through half of their project, but it was just amazing to see the creativity that was coming up. Connections to the real world, like they were like, when they thought the process, they were like connecting to what they already knew, what they already seen. And then I said, okay, from what you know and seen, can you make your own? Can you be a competitor? And that's what they were doing. And some groups were stronger than the others, as we saw between the 2 groups. My first group was actually a group of 5, 4 to 5 people. And they were a strong group of 4 to 5 people. Like they came to school every day. They were working, they were collaborating. Groups that were successful understood the math concept easily. So that's also what helped them, was that this was a group that understood math to a level that they could teach each other. The one who couldn't, the strong one would teach the one that couldn't understand a lot quicker. And it was just such a group that collab. And that's what we noticed about a lot of the things, was that groups that had somebody who could teach them understood as a whole. And groups that were not as successful in math were high in creativity though. And that's why I do not dock the points there, was that even though math was a little struggle for them, they were high in creativity and interest. It was a lot of effort from all around, from all students. There was no group that was actually lacking in creativity, in effort, in trying. Um, the areas I say, based on that, the areas I say I was successful in is students' understanding of creativity or math or both. You could put them in definitely like you understood the creativity part, the area that like that was your strong suit. Now I have to teach you math. And because of the pacing, unfortunately, I couldn't say fully well into math, but maybe about 75% understanding. Um, the students pre-planning and building, I would say definitely that was a lot more stronger. When I say pre-planning, I mean the beginning process of what kind of business you wanted, what kind of, how much was it going to cost. So when I say the beginning process, this part right here, I mean, kind of like this group. This group just decided to rewrite it so that they can make sure they have space. But it was on this paper when they had to go down to each question, that the students really were strong in this section. Especially figure out the business names, describe their business. I would say that part. Then it was the part of where this group got to go further, are you sure? And how much people? And like they were almost done. So like answering the last two questions on this, they were getting there, and all they had to do was make the table, make the graph, and all those different things to really show that they can do it multiple ways. Seeing the students understand how equations and functions were built through proportional rates. So through the prices that they were doing, they understood it. When I would be more like a guiding light to explain to them that your prices are the rates, are the proportions, and are the functions. It's just that now they have to see it in a equation style rather than seeing it, oh, okay, this is, per month. And kind of like they kind of got it, but for majority of the part. On the areas in growth that I still have, I have to say timing and pacing. That was like my biggest struggle, is figuring out time of when I'm teaching them, making sure they continue to work, continue to pace them to make sure that it's more of a rolling wheel that continues rather than like a stuck wheel that's just like which way we're turning, which way we're doing it, and all of those different things. And when I say that, in the timing and pacing, is also giving that space for creativity. Like I said, the creativity was off the chart, but to actually create the proposal itself, I know with my students, it would have been super creative and super even more influential and more understanding if they got to do that part of creating in their way to actually do it in Shark Tank style. And unfortunately, that's the part that, yeah, Shark Tank did not get there due to testings and also school schedules. So I failed to look at what needs to happen day by day as a school. And there are times where I need to do testing, so I had to stop. And then like holidays and days off and those different things, I didn't put too much into consideration that it would have set us back a lot. And so that's the reason why, if I was to do this again, I would actually plan it a lot better, making sure that there is better time and spacing, especially for the end. And that's why I said ensure that students can actually present what they created, because I was super proud of what I got just within their proposal, pre-proposal, before they actually did the actual full-on proposal. Um, and how I might want to continue growing after this experience. I said organization for the purpose of timing and pacing. Build a project while teaching along through the unit. So like I mentioned earlier, incorporating the project and the unit a lot more smoother. So if I'm talking about this in the unit, whatever part of the project is, so like probably like in the beginning, like when I'm introducing the unit, and maybe about a day or two after, introduce the project. So that way the students are thinking about what kind of business already, how they want their business. And then when they talk about functions, like in the beginning section of it would be more so of like, hey, because we're learning functions, and I want you to now create your prices. And I'm going to explain why a little bit later, but I want you to create your prices so that way we can figure out why is this relatable to functions. And that way they create the equation, and already there is all set. And then while we're learning how to create functions and all those different things, and also they can figure out the rent and all those, like just having a more integrating unit with the assessment rather than seeing like the assessment was in the end. That way the true assessment will be when they present rather than the building section. And I feel that will be a lot better in the way our school runs and the way our schools do the pacing in general. So that way the general pacing doesn't feel so rushed. And that way we can truly get to the end and be more intentional within this unit. That way I feel like students will feel like I'm not just doing worksheets. I'm actually creating something while I'm building this unit, so that once I get to the end and pass my summative, I know why. It's because I built something while I'm doing my summative, while I'm getting ready to ace my tests, while I'm actually like, and even if they fail the test, they still have something to be proud of. And so that's pretty much my result of how this whole experience has been. And honestly, I can say that I truly do enjoy this. I enjoyed this process to really help me grow. And actually, this process actually got me ready and prepared for this unit, this next unit that I'm doing, that I'm about to enter, and honestly, be more intentional with my students and integrate their assessments a lot better within the unit. And so I just want to say thank you for listening. And yeah, and that's it.